It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast, episode 97. If you've been with us for a while, thank you. If you're brand new, welcome. This is a great episode we've got coming up, but before I do that, let me introduce, as always, my fantastic co-host, never let me down, or I've let him down in 97 episodes, Christmas Day, New Year's Day. They don't stop this roadshow. It's Rob D. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Rob.
Well, that for an intro.
That was a great intro.
I've had a coffee. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel you thought you'd be running out of ideas by now, but no, it's just getting stronger.
Yeah, I'm just warming up.
Like the coffee, maybe. If you are just joining us for the first time, hello, you have picked an excellent time to join us because in this episode, we are doing the first in a 3-part series called How to Become a Property Investor. Because the idea is that we've had a lot of meetups with our listeners and they've said that some of their favourite episodes are the very early ones because that's when we were tackling the very basic topics and where there's a lot of learning to be done. But we're frankly a little bit embarrassed about those early episodes. So we figured that to spare our embarrassment and to bring together loads of the ideas that we've talked about in one easy place, we'd do a 3-part series that would be perfect for anyone who's just getting started in property investment. So putting everything together in the same place, which means that if you are new to property or if you've got a friend who's talking about getting into property, you can just point them straight to these episodes and they'll find everything that they need that sums up everything that we've talked about for the last 2 years. So that's coming up as well as a news story and a resource. But first, episode 100 coming up, Rob.
It is.
We're just going to let it slide by, I assume.
Yeah, it'll be a quiet one. Or maybe not. So, episode 100, it's going to be a big thing for us. It's something we're super proud of. So, why not launch your book on the same day? You know, that should keep us busy. So, property investment tips. We've mentioned it for a while. The book we're launching, as you now know, to coincide with episode 100. It's a book that Rob, myself, and lots of other investors have put together their best, juiciest tips for property investment. And we're going to be launching it then. And best of all, we're going to tell you how to get it free. Stay tuned for the next few episodes. You'll hear more and more information about that. But we are so excited about launching this book. We're expecting big things. And most of all, it's because we want you to spread the word because we're going to make it free. We're not looking to make money on this. So it's going to be free for as long as Amazon lets us do so. Make sure that you get the word out early on when it does launch. But we've got a few weeks to wait. But we just wanted to give you a heads up that it's happening.
Yep, really excited about that. Big things coming up. So stay tuned for that. But moving on to this week's episode and a news story this week. There seem to be quite a few London doom and gloom stories around at the moment, Rob, and this doesn't quite qualify as one of them, but it is talking about, well, it's kind of the media acknowledging that, hey, there is life outside London.
Who knew? Yeah, last week we talked about our predictions, and if you've not listened to that episode, definitely go back and listen to it, because we didn't really hold back. You know, after we finished recording, I was like, wow, been pretty bold there. So go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. But one of the things we were talking about is cities outside of London, the second cities, your Leeds, your Manchesters, of course Birmingham, and then your Nottinghams, your Liverpools and your Sheffields, those cities, you know, all these other major cities outside of London will do a lot better this year. This report seems to come to a similar conclusion. It highlights Birmingham, but it does mention other cities as well. So it doesn't really come as a surprise because London has gone so hard, so fast for so long that it's unsustainable, that level of growth. And some areas have only just started to grow. So you would expect that wealth to trickle down. So it seems to be the case. And this report goes into detail on that. So it'll be in our show notes. If you want to go to the show notes on this one, it's thepropertyhub.net/how to become a property investor. So that's how to become a property investor. Rob, how do you become a property investor?
Okay, so to become a property investor, there's a lot to think about. And you might be thinking, okay, I need to call some estate agents. I need to find a tenant. I need to work out how much money to offer on this property that I just saw. But whoa. Loads more to think about than that. And so we've got 3 parts. The first one is a little bit more general to help you decide whether it's for you and some of the big things you should be talking about. Then we're going to take you through some of the key things to know about, things like yields and inflation and leverage, all these really important concepts. And then we're going to take you right into the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. So by the end, you're going to know exactly how to become a property investor. You're not going to know it all. That's going to take a bit more time, but you're going to know exactly what you need to know, and you're going to have a far better understanding of what property investment is all about. So let's start by talking about why you would want to be a property investor. Why do people do this? Well, there are two reasons. There's income now. So you'll rent a property out, you'll pay all your expenses on it, and you'll have money left over if you've done it right. So you make some money, funds drop into your bank account every month. Very nice. Great with the first time that happens. I remember that feeling. Also, capital growth later. So you buy a property you've probably heard doubles every 10 years historically. We did an episode on this and we found that it varies, but on average, it's every 9 years. So you obviously don't know for sure that's going to happen. You don't know that there's going to be capital growth at all, but you can be pretty certain that there will be if you wait for long enough. So you get money now and you make a profit later when and if you sell.
They're great, and they're the things that will lead you to this, but ultimately property investment can change your life. It can mean that you can possibly retire early if you do things correctly, maybe part retire, or give you freedom to do other things in your life. There is a pension crisis, there's no doubt about it, and things are getting worse, not better. People are turning to property as an alternative, but some people are more ambitious than just hoping to retire by 65. Some people are looking to retire early, and property investment is actually one of those few vehicles that people can use to potentially get there. Please don't think it's easy or get rich quick, it certainly isn't, but it is possible to get wealthy slowly. That leads us to the question, can anyone do this? Well, strictly speaking, yes. Property investment is open to everyone. You don't need any special qualifications or secret powers. Property investment can be done by anyone, it really can. Now, there are advantages. Clearly, if you have lots of capital, lots of money to invest, and fantastic credit rating, then it's going to be a lot easier to invest in property, whereas somebody with no capital and a bad credit rating would find it difficult. But not impossible. There are ways of approaching it where you might be able to invest. Now, please, if you do have bad credit and no funds to invest, now think, yes, I can get started. You will have the hardest journey. It will be the most difficult for you to start. But if you do have funds, and you do have a good credit rating, then actually the world's your oyster. It's not so much can I invest, but how do you do it? Where do you start? And there's certain questions that you should ask yourself.
Yeah, there are. I said earlier that you shouldn't just dive into going and looking for a property. The people who tend to get into trouble and have bad experiences with property are the ones who rush in. And then you ask them some of these questions, they have no idea. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's why you got into trouble. There are some questions that are very useful to ask yourself. The first one is, what's your why? Why are you wanting to do this in the first place? So Rob alluded a minute ago to some of the great things that property investment can do for you in terms of early retirement and passive income and all that kind of thing. So really zero in on that. What is your objective? And make it something concrete that you can relate to that will keep you motivated. Why do you want to retire early? Is it so that you can spend more time with your family? Or why do you want to quit your job? Is there something that you've always wanted to do? And if you can just get financial security, then you can pursue that. Having a strong reason for why you're doing this will keep you going, because it's not always going to be easy. And it's going to involve making sacrifices. But having the why is the thing that's going to keep you going through those hard times.
It is. And then once you've got that why, you need to then make it more tangible. You need to turn that into a goal. So if it is you want to retire early, then you need to start setting SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. So you need to go, okay, well, I want to retire early, so let's turn that into a SMART goal. I want to retire by 55, have an income of X amount, and I'm going to do that via this route of property investment. That's a goal. And now you can start breaking those goals down to shorter terms. So you may go 3 years, and then you may go 1 year, and then you may go monthly. Rob and I have talked about goals a lot, and rightly so. They really can change your level of success in property investment, or in fact anything you do in life. There are multiple episodes on goal setting and thinking big, and we've even got a course on the Property Hub about how to set your goals. So we'll link to all of those in the show notes. The show notes for all the parts that we're talking about. So if you want all the links, if you want to go to one place for all of this rather than individual episodes, just keep it simple and go to thepropertyhub.net/how to become a property investor. thepropertyhub.net, how to become a property investor. All those goals Episodes and the course will be there, but do not start investing until you've taken that exercise.
Okay, so having done that, that's kind of the personal and the motivational. Let's get down to the practical. Do you have funds? Because let's get realistic for a minute. You will need some of your own money. Whatever a man with a shiny suit and a leased Ferrari might tell you, you will need some money to invest. There are ways of doing it without putting in so much of your own funds, but especially when you're starting out, you're going to need some money. So do you have any? And the amount of money you've got is going to make a big difference to your strategy, which is something that we're going to talk about. If you've got pots of cash and you're just looking for somewhere to stash it all, you're going to approach it very differently from if you've just got a small amount of money that you had to save really hard for. You're going to approach the way that you invest property and what you buy and how you do it in a completely different way. So looking at whether you've got funds is important. If you don't have any money at all, then realistically, you're not just going to be able to go out and buy a load of houses, but that's okay. The fact that you've started educating yourself now and putting a plan in place means that you can start planning for how you're going to get that money together and what you're going to do when you've got it. And that means that when you do have it, because you'll have been thinking about it for all this time, you're going to make far better decisions and do better than if you just started straight away out the gate. So property requires two things, money and time. That's the money, but you need to find out if you've got the time as well.
So yeah, do you have the time? That's something you need to ask yourself. Don't kid yourself. If you're working full time, a lot of hours already, you've got family commitments, then taking certain strategies or certain approaches to property just aren't realistic. And people will often sell you a dream in property, but fail to mention all the grind and graft that has to go into it. So if you are time poor, you might need to partner with other people or companies to make this happen for you. Use other professionals who've been there and done it. If you have lots of time on your side, then you may be open to approaching different strategies, a little bit more niche that require a bit more time and effort. Knowing your time commitments that you can put into this will dramatically change the strategy when you set one.
And a final question to ask is it for you? Is property investment for you? I would argue that if you're listening to this, then it probably is. If you're interested in property, then there's going to be a way that you can make it work for you, because there are so many different ways that you can do it. Everyone's got things that they like doing and things that they don't like doing so much. And everyone's got strengths and they've got weaknesses. And there are so many different ways of investing in property that you can find a strategy that plays to your strengths and you can end up doing things you enjoy. So if you love getting your hands dirty and doing refurbishments, brilliant. There's going to be a way of making that work. But if you can't stand that and you've got no interest in it at all, but you like playing around with spreadsheets, then you can make it work as well. There are all kinds of different ways of doing it. I'd say that the only way that property investment wouldn't be for you is if you've got no interest in it. I mean, you can still make it work if you've got no interest in it, but it just won't be quite so much fun. Or if you absolutely can't stand taking any kind of risk. Because we'll talk about risk, of course. There are different types of risk. There are some ways of investing that are clearly more risky than others. There are others that have really very little risk attached to them. And we're going to talk about ways of reducing risk and ways of not worrying about your perceived risk. But if you're worried about even having your money in a UK bank because you're worried that it might collapse, or you're worried about putting it under the mattress because someone might come in and steal it, then it's probably not for you. There is going to be some level of risk. But for the most part, I'd say property investment could be for anyone. And I think lots of people come up with reasons and excuses why it's not for them, whereas in reality, pretty much anyone can make a go of it.
Right. So they're the questions to ask yourself. You need to start taking your first steps. So do we run out and buy the property now? Whoa, hold back, rodeo. It's not time yet. You've got certain things you need to start doing. And we're going to run through a few of those now. This list is not exhaustive, so you can add things to this, but these are some of the key things that you should start to do before you jump head first. And the first being networking. Now, networking doesn't necessarily mean going to networking events, shaking hands and talking to different people about property. It can be, and that's fantastic. You know, lots of people do that and benefit greatly from it. We have a very informal meetup where Property Hub members and Property Podcast members come together once a quarter just to meet informally. Very nice, very good crowd. Everyone's relaxed. There's no selling. You can go to that if you're new to property and property networking in particular, because you'll find it very approachable. There are other more formal networking events where there's a lot of selling going on, but you can still find benefit in those too. If you want to find out more about the free events we put on, go to thepropertyhub.net/how to become a property investor, and you can find more there. But networking, meeting other people who've been there and done it, will only help you. Learn from their experiences, learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes, and then put some of that into practice when you go forward. But by beginning to network, it can only put you at an advantage. Remember, networking just isn't in person though. Networking can be going on the Property Hub. The Property Hub is a free forum for you to use. Very friendly as well. Go on there, introduce yourself, and start talking to other people. If you don't like the thought of going out meeting people face to face, then starting with the Property Hub forum could be an easy way to do that. Or if you don't have the time to go and meet at these face to face meetings, then again, forums like the Property Hub will help.
Yeah, and another thing that they can help with is building your team. Because putting a team together is essential to success in property. So in that team would be people like an accountant, a mortgage broker, a solicitor. And in all these professions, there are good ones and there are not so good ones. And to find the good ones, the absolute easiest, quickest and best way of doing it is to get a personal recommendation. And you'll be best able to do that if you've got a network of people that you can ask. And this is something that happens on the Property Hub all the time. People go on there and say, I'm in such an area. Can someone recommend an accountant or something like that? And this is great because building a team is really important. Like, I am a huge property geek. I love this stuff. I love learning everything I can learn about tax, but I'd never dream of doing my own accounts. I love learning everything that I can possibly learn about mortgages, but I'd never dream about trying to arrange my own. I use a broker. Because having a team of professionals who know their part of their job brilliantly will allow you to focus on what you do brilliantly and get far better results. Even if you're independent-minded and you like the idea of doing everything yourself, you'll quickly find that by working with people who are brilliant at what they do, you'll be able to be far more successful as a result. And you can focus on what you need to do, things like starting to build a strategy.
Start to build a strategy. Wow, how important is this? It's very important. When anybody ever comes to visit me at the RMP property offices, we will not let them invest until they've built out their strategy. You could say, well, Rob, do you not like being a business? Well, the reason we focus on strategy is it really will help people have that focus. If you just start investing, you might do a deal or two, but what you'll find is you'll think, oh, what's next? Where's this taking me? By having a strategy, you know where you're going with this and you know each step you should be taking. So step 1, do this. Step 2, do this, and so on. And then you will get to your goal. It's not, oh, will I, maybe, hope so. You know exactly step by step how you're going to get there. Setting a strategy is very important to a successful property investment journey. So make sure you do that before you start investing. Yes, taking action is important, but doing these things we're talking about now are just as important because they could be the difference between success and failure.
Yep, and alongside building that strategy, another critical thing to do is increasing your knowledge. So the thing about property is you're never going to know it all. And that's why having experts on hand and having a network is so important, because even between you all, you're never going to know everything, but you can know far more than you could on your own. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to learn anything. In fact, you should try and learn as much as you possibly can. We've got you covered on this in so many different ways. There's the Property Hub, where you can learn from all the thousands of posts on there. There are nearly 100 episodes of this podcast. I've written a couple of books, which we'll link to in the show notes. We'll have forgotten things as well. There's a lot of content out there, and that's just from us. And the other material is apparently available from other people, I believe. But there's no shortage of ways to increase your knowledge when it comes to property. All of these things that I've just talked about are fantastic and will really benefit you, and you should try and learn as much as you can. But the real knowledge starts when you actually start doing it for yourself. And so that's why you need to move from this kind of learning about it, thinking about it, doing your research kind of phase into actually starting to research specific investments.
Research is so important. Phil and Kirsty say location, location, location. Rob and I say research, research, research. It's so important. When you look at any investment, you have to make sure that you know the area, you know the tenant profile that you're taking on, you know the property type is right for that area. There's so much. I mean, that's just the beginning. Please don't believe that's the list. We've still got research. So often it's so important. You need to research the people you're working with. You know, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the people you're working with. You know, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research the right strategy for you. There's a fair bit to do. But if you want to be successful, you need to research then you'll find that time to put that effort in, to put that time in. There are people that can help you and cut that time down, brokers, sources, so on. There's lots of people out there who can reduce that time. But if you're letting somebody else do that research for you, then you have to research that person. So if you're using experts, you're building a team, you've got other people around you that are helping you build your portfolio, make sure you research them. Whether they're an insurance broker, a mortgage broker, a letting agent, a property company, whatever it may be, research them too, because you can't just rely on trust. Research is very important.
It is. And although research is important, what you do not want to do is get stuck in the research stage forever. And here's a phrase that we've used a lot over the last couple of years, analysis paralysis. The reason we've talked about it a lot is it is a very real phenomenon. You find people who get stuck in this research phase, and for whatever reason, they can never quite move on to actually take action and buy a property. And maybe it's all very interesting doing all this research. Hopefully you're finding it fun, but ultimately you're doing it for a reason, because you want to achieve whatever it was that you had earlier with your why. You want to retire early, you want to quit your job, whatever it is that you want property to do for you. You're not going to do it just by researching. You need to actually take action. So that's where making a commitment comes in. Just draw a line in the sand and say, okay, at this point, I will have done my research and I'll start actually doing. That might be in a couple of months. It might be in a couple of years if you need time to get your money together. But either way, you don't want to be just kind of stuck, unable to take action, either because you're afraid of taking a risk and failing, or often you just think you don't know enough. And I think everyone at every stage feels like they don't know enough. Because as we said, there's a lot to know. You're never going to know it all. But you have to get over that and just jump into it at some point. So that's where making a commitment comes in. Deciding that this is the time that you're going to do it.
So let's wrap up with some general rules. Before we go into part 2, let's talk about general rules. Things that you need to understand, appreciate, and just live by. So we'll go through these quickly, because in part 2 and 3, we're going to go into a lot more detail. But don't worry when you're looking for your first property investment. You're not looking for perfect. So we're saying research, but you're not looking for the perfect investment. You're looking for very good. Because perfect doesn't exist. You can always find a reason not to invest in a certain opportunity. What you want is a very good investment. Still very hard to find, but a lot easier to find than perfect.
And when you're looking, look for another word that we've used a lot over the last 100 episodes, fundamentals. Understand the fundamentals and follow them. What are fundamentals? We'll come back to this, but it's things like schools, transport, shops, employment, the kind of reasons that people will want to live somewhere. You can buy a property which looks great on paper, but ultimately, if no one wants to live there, every time it comes vacant, it's a massive struggle to find a tenant. That's not going to be a good situation. So the fundamentals are crucial, and that's something that we're going to be talking about a lot more.
We've mentioned it once already, and we'll probably mention it again after this, but do lots of research. It'll be a common theme through each part, but do lots of research.
And when you're looking at a particular opportunity, make sure it fits your strategy. So we talked about strategy earlier. We will talk about it again. But it's very common for people to just kind of jump around looking at all kinds of different things without really thinking about where it's ultimately going to get them. Developing a strategy, then being laser focused on that strategy, will help you race ahead while everyone else is still floundering around.
And a rule always to adhere to is buy below market value. Property is a unique asset class where it is possible to buy below market value. We're going to talk about this more in part 2 and 3, but just make a note of it for now, because it's super important that you make sure you do this.
And most important of all, I talked about it earlier, but take action. All of this is worth nothing if you don't ultimately do anything with it. So you might not feel ready right now, but hopefully after you've listened to parts 2 and 3 and you've started to put some of these things into practice, you'll start feeling ready very soon. And that is the time to take action and get out there and do it.
So that's part 1. Part 1 is general. What you have to understand, find out if it's right for you, questions to ask yourself, and some general rules you need to live by. Part 2 and 3, it's much more detail. Part 2 is the education lessons you need to know and understand before investing. So we're going to go through the key points, leverage, inflation, and many more, so you understand exactly how all those things work, so you're investing with that knowledge. Remember, we've already said you need the knowledge. Well, next week, we're going to give you a lot of it. And then in the final part of the series, we're going to be looking at your first investment, what you should and shouldn't be doing. So parts 2 and 3, very exciting, lots of value to come. We look forward to you joining us for those. And remember, go to thepropertyhub.net because you will find all the notes, all the key points for the 3 episodes at thepropertyhub.net, how to become a property investor. That's thepropertyhub.net, how to become a property investor.
Okay, so we've got covered a lot of ground. Let's wrap up with a resource of the week. As we always do, we've done it 96 times now. This is the 97th. And this week, Rob, a way to find a new business name.
Well, if only we'd found this a while back, Rob, because we started a fair few. Namium.com. Again, it'll be in the show notes, so don't worry about trying to catch the spelling now. But it's a very simple, fun and free tool to use. A big box at the top, type the word in that relates to your industry, and it will give you dozens, if not hundreds, of suggestions for business names. Some good, some not so good. But if you're thinking about starting a business or you're just curious about the idea of starting a business, then have a look at this. It's a fun tool. May give you some ideas. It's free, so why not take a look? It's very easy. You don't have to sign up for anything. Give it a go. It's actually quite amusing, some of the stuff that comes up. Check that resource out and you might get your next business name. We may have had 98 resources, Rob, but we've had hundreds of reviews. And this week is no different. We've got another one in. And thank you to Paul in London. An important step. This is very informative and delightfully presented podcast. I believe that this initiative is a great step towards a shining positive light on the world of property investment. As a young, recently qualified architect, I'd love to hear Rob and Rob's thoughts on building a property portfolio by building homes from scratch. Keep up the good work. Wow, okay, well that's intimidating, building your own portfolio, literally. We've done 97 episodes. If we're going to 200, I'm sure we're going to have to cover that subject at some point, Rob.
Yeah, but not quite yet. I don't think either of us is that handy. But, maybe one day. I know it's an ambition for a lot of people to either build their own home or build homes from scratch. Not something that we've done yet, but like we said earlier, loads of different ways of investing in property, and that's just one of them. The ways that we talk about are by no means the only ways. So thank you, Paul, for that review, and maybe that's something that we can talk about at some point in the future. But next week, we are going to be talking again about how to become a property investor part 2. So loads more useful stuff in there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you know anyone who's been talking about getting started in property investment, you probably do. It's the kind of thing that loads of people talk about, especially in the UK, but not that many people actually go on to do. If you know people who are talking about it, this is the best place to send them from everything that we've done to find out if it's something that's for them and to start that learning process. So you can just send them straight over to thepropertyhub.net/how-to-become-a-property-investor.
So that's episode 97, done, locked down. Next week, 98, part 2, 99, part 3, and then the big episode 100. So there's lots of exciting things still to come before we get to episode 100. We look forward to joining you next week at the same time. But until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.